Hey, Chris,
Yeah, Paul.
I had a thought.
What was it?
Water is not expensive enough. For some reason, we don't value water in a way where we are charging for it like you would a commodity, for some reason. 1% of 1% of all water on the planet Earth is both fresh and accessible, or I should say easily accessible. And it doesn't seem that water is really a commodity. Maybe you have a little bit better insight to that. I don't think it's considered a commodity.
Water is hydrogen and oxygen. That's about as far as I go.
I think I lost you somewhere. So that idea of it being extremely scarce, I don't understand why it's so inexpensive. I mean, my water bill every month, we get billed every 2 months, and it's, I think, around $50 for open the tap, ready to drink water that I have no idea where it came from. I can't explain that. They're saying that the next world wars will be fought over water, and yet we're paying less than a penny, less than any measurable monetary amount per gallon. And that's probably true around the United States. I think the average is 0.003 cents per gallon.
That's pretty cheap.
That's pretty cheap, right? On average.
That's about what a view to my shitty website is worth. About. Maybe a little bit more now, but I've noticed that too. Not so much in the pricing of my water, kind of as you were saying, but when they have to start rationing it. So I remember when I lived in California that there would be parts of the time of the year in Southern California where you couldn't water your lawn on either certain days or certain sides of the street or certain house numbers as a way to limit the amount of water that people were using because there was, I don't know, maybe even like there was a drought going on, right? And people were just running out of water. And usually the way that you avoid rationing and shortages and of that sort is you have to like let the price adjust. So in economic theory, when you have a commodity, in this case water, that can, and I mean that not in the sense of like it's ubiquitous, but more of just like as a thing that you can buy and sell, right? Like you're supposed to like let the market kind of decide the price, and in that way you never really have a shortage. So like McRibs at McDonald's only come into play not because there's like a shortage of pork, but because I think McDonald's probably just arbitrages the price of pork. So when the price of pork drops enough where they can make McRibs, they have them, and when they don't, they don't. And so with water, the issue is it's just subsidized up the butt, I imagine, to the point where you were saying it's 0.003 cents per gallon. And so you get issues with rationing and stuff that like wouldn't happen if you just let the price of water adjust to what people want to use it for. So I agree with the high level sentiment that water is too inexpensive, and it distorts the market pricing mechanism that maybe could help avoid some of the problems associated with inexpensive water.
But see, I don't think that there's a market for it. I don't think it's traded. I don't think it's considered scarce in the economic sense where it follows the market, because we were in a serious drought here in California where you could not drive on a freeway or pass a sign that says, make sure you turn off that tap, tap, don't tap, whatever.
Don't tap the tap.
And yet the cost of water remained basically the same.
Yeah.
Maybe it went up a penny per something.
Well, so that's the problem, right? Like that's it. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on California water laws, but I imagine that there's some kind of price ceiling on water, or it's just subsidized to the point where the price never changes. And so what happens is when you get extreme droughts or something of that nature, they have to put up those signs to ration it because they can't let the price adjust to reflect the current demand for the thing. So water doesn't have to be traded to be a commodity. It just has to be priced at a level such that the end user can accurately understand the cost of using it. So, right, if your price of water went from 0.001 cents to 10 cents a gallon, and all of a sudden your water bill was $1,000 a month, people would sure as fuck stop watering their lawns, right? A green lawn isn't worth $1,000 a month, but maybe it is. It is worth 10 cents a month, or whatever it would be without having an actual price. And so I think a lot of the issue is actually the fact that it is subsidized or has some kind of price ceiling in most areas. Because I agree, I've never paid the price of water, I don't think I've ever really not cared about, which is, I don't know if that's pompous or not.
Because you haven't had to. I mean, I would argue that unless you live in Flint, Michigan at this point, you probably haven't had to care. And I think nor should you have to care. In terms of the United States and I guess first world countries, what would you call it?
Non-developing nations.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of are doing it right. I don't think that we need to start punishing ourselves because other people on the planet haven't gotten there yet. But in the same sense, though, on the other side of the coin, we're getting to the point where it's become seemingly ubiquitous, but not ubiquitous at all, considering how little of it we have to work with on the planet. And I read something that we have enough fresh water to supply 9 billion plus people. It's not like we actually, in terms of the definitive amount, we can actually give it to as many people as we need to right now. We're just really bad at it. Mm-hmm. And people like Dean Kamen, you know who Dean Kamen is?
No idea.
Dean Kamen, he's probably most notable for inventing the Segway.
Oh, okay, that guy.
That little two-wheel thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the most pop thing he's done. He's done a lot of healthcare-related inventions, like a wheelchair that will rise up to eye level, rise the occupants up to eye level, and it can go upstairs. And he invented some sort of portable dialysis machine, which is super crazy. But most recently,
things that have value, not a Segway.
Yeah, things that people can actually use in everyday life.
Yeah, that sounds helpful.
And not just mall cops. But he invented this latest thing called a slingshot, which is basically a water purifier that runs where you can put anything into it that's wet, and out of it you get pharmaceutical grade water. And I don't know if you've seen.
High? What is pharmaceutical grade?
Meaning that's the purity level.
It's just pure. Okay.
Yeah, it's super pure. You can.
I've heard that you can't have like too pure water. Is that
yes.
Distilled water? Is it?
You can't drink distilled water because it will start to leach all the minerals out of your body and ultimately kill you.
This is potable slingshotted water.
That's one of those things that why aren't these things ubiquitous around the world? They run on like 1,000 watts a day. And they can purify like hundreds of gallons a day, and like they could basically feed any kind of village, town, or whatever that it would need to. The problem is we don't have them.
Yeah, so that means, I mean, if you don't have them, in theory, that means that the cost is either still too high for the people that do need them, or that the cost is too high relative to the supply we already have in places like America that just don't need them, right? So it's either it's too expensive for people in developing nations, and it's not needed because we have an oversupply, or at least a large enough supply of water in like America.
There might be other unrelated obstacles that are the reasoning why it's not ubiquitous. I don't know. I mean, there are lots of different ways to purify water. There's that straw that you can put in any kind of contaminated water, and what you suck out is totally purified.
Do you study like water inventions in your spare time? I've never heard of any of these. The one I've heard of was like the some kind of packet of something you can put into water to help separate like the dirt from the water to make it potable. But that was only because I saw it on YouTube one time. Yeah,
that's really super awesome. I don't really know if that that powder thing where you see all the sediment sink to the bottom and up top is supposedly pure water. Like, does that have any pathogens in it? Is it just totally pure and all the bad stuff is at the bottom?
I think it was like Mark Rober on YouTube.
Yeah, it's Mark Rober.
I don't know if that's an official source of information to cite, but he's for some reason always wearing a hat. So that makes him.
Well, he's always wearing a hat and letting us know that he worked at NASA. Those are the two constants.
And then he has nephews. Yeah, nephews and kids.
That he really likes.
Yeah, and wants to show on his YouTube channel all the time for some reason.
Right. Developed countries have the ability to do some pretty amazing shit. And in terms, I mean, this kind of echoes back to my Mars thing, is like, hey, there are a lot of people who for some reason, don't have clean water to drink on the planet. Let's take a rest from the shooting people into Mars and let's handle that part first. And it's totally doable. And I think part of the problem is that there's very little awareness as to how scarce. Is this a Lion King?
God, I was going to say. I'm proud of you, Simone, or Puma, or whatever it is, Simone.
I'm not saying that we should start charging so much money for water. I kind of like that water is not super expensive. But I think the detriment to that, the consequences of that, is that people just don't value it. They don't like electricity. There's arguably way less water than electricity, and yet they've managed to figure out how to sell electricity in a way that seems to follow the rules of economics and the rules of scarcity.
Well, right. So you want to have people be able to drink water when they want to drink water. So like that's a noble goal. So I think the whole issue is just price ceilings and subsidies. There's some kind of economic regulation around the price of water, and so you do want to have people be able to drink water. So maybe there's certain faucets that always get. You mostly 2 meters, right? You need like a meter for your faucet water that is the drink water. So there's, I don't know how difficult this is, but then you want another meter that's all your rest of your water, and so that rest of the water one you want to let the market set a price for, which is when there's a drought that the price goes up, and so people will use less of that water, but they still have access to the drinking water. I mean, that's
right. I mean, I think there's a lot of wiggle room right now. I mean,
yeah.
I think that if you have a house or a apartment or whatever, a space to live in that has access to electricity, it most likely has access to plumbing, at least in the United States. And if you are receiving benefits from the government or some sort of subsidy from the government because you have low income, that's also handled with electricity. You can apply for help.
I think the issue is, I think you're trying to make it's probably not as scarce as you think that it is, right? But kind of like almost by definition, right? So they've figured out a way. Even when California had like the drought out of the Bible, it's still people. The only result was like people like billboards. That was the net end result. No one died of dehydration directly. I mean, maybe
right.
So like. It can't be all that scarce if it's to the point, at least in America, right, where people aren't dying from it. So like developing nations, they probably have a different set of problems where they don't have the infrastructure to get it to people, and that might be a critical issue. And so, right, I think there's probably a split there between the needs of third world countries where don't have enough water, in America where we have an overabundance, and we need to just probably better allocate our use of it. It actually reminds me of a meme I saw on Reddit. It was a while ago, where it was like this little kid in a third world nation, like looking up at you, like all like quizzically, and he's like, "You're telling me you have enough fresh water that you can shit in it?" And I thought that was so like that kind of like it's probably more of a split. So I think at a high level, it'd be from economic perspective, it's really interesting that we do subsidize the water and don't allow market mechanisms to help in shortage situations or in when things get a little bit rough. But I think there's probably a much larger issue in access to water worldwide.
Even though we saw all of those billboards, nobody really cared because there wasn't any consequence to it. Even though they were saying, "Oh, there's this terrible drought. Please don't water your yards. Please don't shower for too long." I could have gone home and turned on the faucet and just left it on, and nothing would have happened. I would have paid maybe a little bit more money for my water bill, but nothing would have happened. Like there's no shaming. I think we need more shame. We need water shaming, Chris.
No, you just need to let the thing price right? That's all it is. If you had to pay for the actual price of water, you would use less of it. So the example would be in college. We had the sustainability social justice warriors in college were like, all right, we're going to have a dorm by dorm challenge of who can reduce their electricity footprint the biggest this month. And the winner will get like some soda or whatever the hell they were giving out at the end of the month.
Worth it.
Yeah. And all my friends were like, I couldn't possibly care less. Right. But so like we didn't win. Oh, darn. But if they had just made every dorm room pay for their own electricity for that month, then people would have been like, oh, shit, I'm turning the light off. I'm never turning the light on. Right. If you have a bunch of college kids and say, you're going to have to pay for your electricity, maybe you pay tenfold or something like that for this 1 month. People are going to be like, oh, I'm going to be using like the public library to do my homework, right? Like I'm not going anywhere near my dorm room. And so, I mean, that's a little bit of extreme, but you just got to like in this case, what you're saying, you don't need public shaming. You just need people to feel the cost associated with what they're doing. Right.
Because it is a scarce resource. And it's a bit odd to me that we don't treat it that way. I mean, that's sort of one of the definitions of economics is a measure of scarcity. And for some reason, water gets a pass on that.
I don't think it's scarce. I think that's why. I mean, I think it. I don't think it's as scarce as you're making it out. I mean, so during drought, but right, you're saying even then they didn't have to raise the price of water, so it couldn't have been that scarce.
I don't think it's that they didn't have to. I think it's that they didn't. Maybe they were regulated not to. Maybe it was a governmental thing. Maybe you're right about that. Maybe not. I don't know. But if it was as bad as they were making it seem, then it should have been much more expensive.
Yeah. Well, the same issue is another example is the oil shortage in the 70s when you had to like wait in line at the gas station and could use like even odd license plate. The issue was they had set some kind of, I think, ceiling on the price of gas. And so when gas is too cheap, then people are going to use more of it. And in this case, most of the time when you run into a shortage when the market can't effectively price the good. And so back then we had lines at gas stations because the price couldn't go above, like whatever it was, say $1. And now the issue is the same thing. But in California, apparently, instead of letting the price go up, they've just figured out ways to subsidize it such that they could keep their industry going at a cost that was lower than the profit from the industry or something along those lines you're saying.
Another argument that it is a commodity and not, I don't know, what is it considered now? What would you consider water?
Yeah, it's a commodity. I think so commodity just means just a pretty ubiquitous good. So I think that's what water is.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems to exist in this weird no man's land of stuff that we absolutely need to survive. I mean, we need water more than we need electricity.
Sure.
And electricity is remarkably more expensive than water. So the idea is that just like oil or anything, as our population increases, which it is, water becomes more and more scarce because the amount of fresh water never changes on the surface of the planet. It just gets recycled and we keep reusing it and reusing it and reusing it. You're probably drinking your own pee right now. And so
it's refreshing.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
I can taste the ammonia.
I came across this graph that'll be in the show notes about water scarcity in the United States. And here, I'm going to send it to you right now so you can look at it so you know what the hell I'm talking about. So this is a graph that shows the amount of scarcity and sort of the levels of scarcity on the planet. And most notable was the United States because in the Southwest mostly, maybe a little bit in the Northwest, there is an actual physical scarcity according to this graph. And that's sort of alarming to me because you were saying, I think it's not as scarce as I think it is. Mm-hmm. If it's true what they say, that future wars will all be fought over the scarcity of water. Imagine what would happen if you woke up one day and your tap did not work. And that was true amongst all your neighbors in your entire city. You probably would be too late when you got to the store to buy bottled water because it would all be gone. So what then? Because you need water. I mean, after about, 12 hours, you really start to feel your dehydration. I mean, at least for me, I notice pretty quickly if I haven't had a drink of water in a couple of hours. I don't know about you. I mean, that's really alarming, right? If you think of it that way, that we totally rely on an infrastructure that I don't understand. I don't know if you understand it. Toilets are magical to me.
Apparently they're not magic if you follow the Harry Potter canon. Have you heard that?
No.
In the string of J.K. Rowling, is that her name?
Yep.
She puts out like canonical pieces of the universe via Twitter every once in a while. Yep. And one of them was that way back in the day, the wizards would just take a shit on the side of the road and vanish it away. There were no toilets. So toilets were not magical. And it wasn't until they discovered Muggle plumbing that they created toilets. As like part of the reason. It has something to do with like the book where he goes down into the toilets with crying Myrtle or whatever.
Why not just disappear it out of your colon? Why do you have to shit it out to begin with?
There's not a lot of thought into why she says some of the stuff she does. Like I think she confirmed that Dumbledore is gay via that. There's a couple other weird ones that she's confirmed via like Twitter that are now apparently canon in the Potter universe. So one of them was just that they just vanished their shit away. But you got a good point. Why not just like as it's seeping out, just make it go away like in real time?
When you feel it, you're just like actio whatever, and then it goes out, right?
Yep. No, I mean there's not a lot of sense to that one. But toilets are magic, but not real magic.
This thing that we do not value and have no real sense of work for. I mean, we know we pay money for it, but we pay so little it might as well be nothing. Now that's gone. And so I don't know. I feel like there should be a little bit more of alarm to that particular scenario if it might happen. Granted, it's probably the chances are very low that something like that would happen.
You get Flint, right? That's basically what you get. You get Flint.
Right. I mean, they had water. It was kind of unhealthy.
I think they've only been able to drink bottled water for like 5 or whatever, 10 years, however long it's been.
I think they still have to drink bottled water.
Yeah.
You can get a reverse osmosis machine for under $200 on Amazon. And that's retail. So I'm sure that they have spent per family more than $200 on bottled water that you can just go pick up, right?
Mhm.
That must be. So I don't know what they're doing over there. But yeah, that's a perfect example. Flint. I found some water usage rankings as to where our water goes in the United States. And the top 3 by a very large margin. So under the 3, it very much granulated to very small slivers in the graph. The number 1 was thermoelectric power. And basically what that means is any kind of water used in the generation of electricity. So most power plants use steam to turn turbines, and the way that they create that steam varies, whether it's nuclear power or coal power. They're basically just heating up water to turn turbines that creates energy. A lot of water goes into that, and number 1, by a hugely large margin. Like, I had no idea we use so much water to create energy.
Is it fresh water?
It's fresh water. Because salt water degrades all of the,
Yeah.
The second is irrigation for agriculture, obviously. We grow a lot of stuff in the United States, and so we need water for that. The third is public supply. So it's nuts. It's crazy how much water we use and how little we pay for it. And perhaps if water was a little bit more expensive for everybody, that maybe power plants would find better ways to use their water and maybe better ways to generate electricity. I mean, solar power does not use any water. Wind does not use any water. So maybe we would be doing more of that if perhaps we valued water in a higher